Hello, everyone. I'm Beth Marcello, Director of Women's Business Development at PNC. I'm also a PNC certified women's business advocate, one of more than 3,000 colleagues who have earned this title and who, like me, work every day to embody PNC support for women and bring it to life. For more than a decade, PNC has been a proud corporate sponsor of WPO. To support WPO and you, its members, we have paired a liaison from PNC to each of the WPO chapters in the markets that we share. Like me, our liaisons are passionate about supporting women and women entrepreneurs. Yes, we would like an opportunity to win your business, but our support for WPO comes from a place of real desire to see women thrive financially. As you might expect from a bank with a robust wealth management practice, our liaisons and their teams are experts in the financial services industry. As one of the country's largest financial services organizations, we also have an expertise in a range of other subjects, including diversity and inclusion, the topic of the exclusive conversation we are privileged to bring to you today. In this video, we're proud to introduce 4 PNC colleagues responsible for attracting, hiring, retaining, promoting, and importantly, integrating a diverse workforce at PNC. You'll see how passionate they are about this work and how becoming more diverse and inclusive within the bank is enabling PNC and PNC Wealth Management to better serve our customers across the country. Although PNC has been on a decades-long journey toward inclusion, all that's happened in 2020 has intensified the importance of this work right now. We know that your companies feel it as well. Our hope is for this conversation to provide you with ideas and insights that you can adopt or adapt for the benefit of your company, your workforce, and your customers. Thank you. And now I'll turn over the program to my esteemed PNC colleagues.
Hello, everyone. We've come together today to share some of the lessons we've learned on our journey at PNC to be a more diverse and inclusive workforce and workplace, and how that's enabling us to better serve a marketplace that's increasingly diverse. I'm Catlin McLaughlin, the head of talent at PNC, and I'm going to act as both moderator and participant in this discussion. With me are Richard Bynum, our Chief Corporate Responsibility Officer, Greg Pollack, PNC's Accessibility Officer, Kelly McClung, a sales leader in our Treasury Management Group, who's here today in her role on the steering committee of our effort to advance, retain, and develop women who are early in their career at PNC. Thank you all for joining me. And let's talk first about diversity and then about inclusion, because they're not one and the same. First and foremost, diversity is about attracting and retaining individuals that bring diverse perspectives to industries like financial services that were traditionally populated by white men. My first question is for you, Richard. Before your current role, you led the branch network in Greater Washington, then the head of business banking, and then regional president in Greater Washington. Can you talk about the business case, the economic imperative for diversity from your perspective, and why recruiting a diverse workforce should be a priority now, not just for big corporations like PNC, but for small businesses as well?
Sure, Kat. Thanks so much for the question. I come to this from the various experiences that you mentioned, but also just recognizing I live in and around Washington, D.C., which is one of the most diverse marketplaces, I think, in the country. And so diversity is all around. And I think the changing demographics of diversity are probably apparent to everyone, right? Whether you speak in terms of the browning of our country, speak in terms of the diverse platform that we have, which includes people of different abilities coming into the workforce. So writ large, the country is getting more and more diverse, and the intersectionality between those various aspects of diversity becoming more and more apparent to us all. So I guess I would start by talking a little bit in terms of the business case about data that's also publicly available to us. There have been a number of studies that show that teams that are more diverse generally perform better than teams that are less diverse. You might factor in a number of reasons why that might be the case, but the one that comes to mind for me really focuses on the area of risk. If we have a team that is all of the same background, coming from a set of the same experiences, the likelihood of that team missing an opportunity or missing a circumstance that might introduce risk to their performance is probably greater than a team that comes together from a wide variety of backgrounds, a wide variety of experiences, and can share those experiences. And this is important, can inclusively share those experiences as a part of the team. If they bring those different aspects of themselves to work, then the likely outcome is going to be greater. And by the way, again, the data is pretty clear in that regard. The second thing I would point to, and again, this goes back to the changing landscape of the workplace in America, is that today more than 50% of the workers in any given business are going to be on the younger side. And younger people are very clear about what their expectations are, who they want to work for, why they want to work, and they're demanding that companies be responsive to those interests and those things that are important to them. And then I guess last but not least, and I'll talk a little bit about diversity in terms of gender. Pew Research says it probably best, and it's clear that in certain capabilities that are important, I think, in a workplace environment today, compromise, the notions of generally behaving in an ethical and fair manner, looking for teamwork, you find that women are in fact positioned better than men in delivering those aspects of the job. So up, down, across, and sideways, I think we would all agree, if you simply look at the data, that a diverse workforce is today and in the future an imperative for any business. And Kat, your purview is talent at PNC. Talk a little bit about what steps PNC's taken to recruit a more diverse workforce.
So I think we've done a lot from a recruiting perspective. And from my perspective, it all starts with data and metrics. And it's not necessarily about goal setting. It's about informing our leaders and our managers how they're doing in creating a diverse workforce. And so one of the tools that we use pretty readily is what we call the recruiting funnel. So every time a recruiter sits down with a hiring manager, they have an ability to show them over their last number of hires, how are women and people of color progressing from, HR interview to line of business interview to offer to accept. So we can diagnose, one, are women and people of color moving through the funnel at the same rate? But two, are there places where we're seeing it break down that either suggest HR should be doing something differently, the line of business could be doing something differently, or if it's at acceptance, does the firm need to do something differently? So it gives us really good insight in how we can do a better job in the process. The second thing I would point to is our company relies very, very heavily on development programs as a way of hiring new talent into the organization. And we hire almost 500 young people a year from colleges and universities around the country. So I'd echo what you said, Richard, that our young people are expecting a diverse workforce. But because we have the ability to recruit straight out of college, we have an ability to go to not only historically Black colleges and universities, but also to work at the state schools that we recruit from to get involved in the African American club, the Hispanic club, the LGBTQ community, and of course, people with disabilities as a way of attracting young people into our organization. And we find that the more we attract diverse talent, the more diverse talent attracts more diverse talent. So thank you for that question for me, Richard. I'm going to actually ask Kelly a question. So Kelly, you've served as the market liaison for the Northern Indiana Region Diversity Council. First, can you talk about how a regional diversity council supports recruitment of diverse candidates into our PNC organization?
Yes, and Kat, thank you very much for this opportunity. Greatly appreciate it. So, as you mentioned, the work of the regional diversity councils were actually created to bring our corporate vision for diversity and inclusion to a regional and market level with a focus in three main areas. I think we've already stated some of them already, but marketplace, workforce, and workplace. And as a part of our workforce initiatives, we support regional efforts with respect to diverse hiring practices by serving at college recruitment days. And I have been fortunate myself to be able to support our efforts here regionally as it relates to work that we've done at the University of Notre Dame, in addition to Indiana University and other state schools across the state of Indiana, as well as you've mentioned as well, Kat, our work with historically Black colleges and universities, which really has been supportive of our diversity and inclusion efforts across the country, across our entire footprint. It's been very critical to our success, I believe. In addition to that, I do believe it's imperative that as a Black leader within this great organization, that I'm able to share my experiences and successes with candidates to help them really imagine the possibilities of what a thriving career at PNC might look like. Members of our Regional Diversity Council across the footprint are presenting and representing our brand every day for potential candidates to really see themselves from a more local, regional, and corporate level, that we're not just talking about diversity and inclusion, but we're actually walking the talk, and we're doing it every day and living our core values by including intentionally the work that we're doing in the marketplace, especially with our workforce. It's our desire to operate across the footprint with a diverse slate of candidates for any opening that we have across our firm. And the regional council, the regional diversity councils really kind of drive that outcome, that desired outcome for our great organization.
Thank you, Kelly. I'm excited to introduce to the conversation now Greg Pollock, who is in the role of Accessibility Officer here at PNC, which for us is a relatively new role. We know that diversity isn't just about gender, race, age, or aspects of diversity that we can see. To attract the best talent, we must embrace people with disabilities. And people with disabilities have been called a hidden market. Their discretionary buying power has been calculated at about $21 billion. So a business with a reputation for not only employing people with disabilities and designing products and buying experience around the needs of this market is more likely to attract customers with disabilities. So Greg, can you talk about how PNC is approaching diversity and inclusion from the enabled perspective? And what are some of the technologies and other adaptations we put in place in order to welcome employees with disabilities? And what insights can you share that can help smaller companies understand the benefits of attracting people with disabilities?
Absolutely, Kat. Thank you for inviting me to share a little bit about our accessibility strategy and speak at this capacity. So accessibility is an extremely hot topic right now. There's so much happening across the board. And I'm very excited to be able to share a little bit about the work that we're doing and why it's so important, and help our community realize the importance of accessibility as well. Despite the many challenges that we navigated in 2020, we're all working from home now. We're all relying increasingly more on technology and different solutions to help us become more productive. And we needed to adapt, and we needed to learn how to adapt to existing circumstances. And what's so interesting about this is we started this work 3 years ago. And the work that we did back then is helping us to shape the employee and customer experience today. And COVID-19 is its own testimony to why accessibility is so important for everyone. And who knew how relevant this book was going to become today? I mean, we're all here on Zoom working from our own homes, and this is not a coincidence. That is accessibility in its truest form. 5 years ago, 1 in 5 people were living with a disability in the United States. And if you asked me back then, what is accessibility? I would have told you to look for ramps or install automatic doors where you can. And little did I know that there was really something that runs much deeper than just ramps and automatic doors. Today, the population is 1 in 4. And people with disabilities are the fastest growing market segment in the world. And they have friends, they have family, they have social media, they have a 75% market reach. And they've been redefining standards for everybody and challenging the status quo with the ultimate goal of improving the quality of our lives. And that is at its root what accessibility is all about. But here's the thing, as a society, we generally don't change things because we want to. We change things because somewhere there was a need. And there was a need for mobile banking, there was a need for digital currency, there's a need to be able to shop online. Um, and fostering that culture of change also requires that we foster a culture within PNC that is ready to be the employer and bank of choice for people with disabilities, because accessibility is about taking our product and services and making sure that these experiences are available to everyone, not just for people with disabilities, but every single person who stands to benefit or gain from our products and services. It's a complete mindset shift, and it's that mindset that allows us to make the most of our talent-focused culture. As you already know, Kat, we don't hire people because we want them to fit in. We hire them because of the expertise they bring to our company, and that mindset plays an important role in emphasizing our commitment to creating a barrier-free environment where all employees are included and ultimately contribute to making the banking experience easier and more accessible to our customers. And we got so many great examples of employee-driven outcomes at play, but I'm just going to name just a few. Earlier this year, the Accessibility Office partnered with Enterprise Innovation and Talent and Total Rewards to host our favorite Accessibility Flash Hack, during which we had several different teams come together to rise to the challenge of shortening the time frame between the request to the delivery of an accessibility accommodation. And our technology and innovation team has a dedicated group of individuals whose entire focus is to make PNC a more accessible place to bank and work. And that team is barely a year old, and they're already driving accessibility through several products and solutions like a accessibility catalog, where we have a complete library of the latest software and hardware available to PNC, and requesting those tools by any employee is now easier than ever. We also partner with several companies out externally to help drive our inclusion within PNC. We're partnering with a startup company called SonicCloud to enhance computer audio for employees who are hard of hearing, and we're in the process of deploying video banking machines that offer customers with the option to interact with a virtual teller verbally or through the chat tool where they can chat back and forth. And these features show how the human experience can really help power more accessible products. And these are all partnerships, whether internal or external. They were steps that were needed that we had to take in order to ensure that accessibility was part of everything that we do. In fact, this very conversation is being captioned right now. We have a sign language interpreter, and I'm very curious to know how many people have elected to rely on on captioning in order to have access to this conversation. This work and the recognition that we receive as a result of that work is a testament to the tremendous dedication of so many of our employees who work tirelessly to make PNC a more accessible place to work and bank. And most importantly, I would recommend to anyone that's tuning into this that the employee advantage is a significant one. No one has to be alone in driving this work. It is very important work, and we all as employees live and breathe that experience every day. And because of that, our employees are the driving force in shifting that perception of what it means to be a truly accessible organization, and also what it means to create truly accessible communities.
Excellent. Thank you so much. As always, Greg, you have a lot of passion around this topic and we appreciate it. Let's transition to, I think, the more challenging part of the conversation, which is inclusion. And we've been successful and we continue to be successful bringing women and people of color into the organization. But the key is, can we keep them? And can we keep them if they don't feel welcomed by us? So Richard, you've been involved in something we launched last year called our Black Leaders Forum. Can you share a little bit about what that is and, what's some of the insights that we've gained from this community of employees?
Yeah, Kat, I can. And thanks for the question. And I'll invite Kelly to speak as well, as she's a member of the Black Leaders Forum. I'm going to take you back 2 or 3 years ago now. I guess it's been after a long 2020. Myself, a regional president by the name of Eddie Myers in our Atlanta market, Bill Dimchik, and a number of senior African American leaders came together for a conversation. And it was one that talked a bit about exactly what you just spoke to, which is that we have a robust pipeline of talent that comes into our company, and it's a diverse pipeline of talent that represents African Americans. It represents all of the diverse segments that one might think of when you want to recruit for diversity and recruit for the marketplace that we see in front of us. But the challenge, as you put it, is that once that talent arrives at PNC and we begin to develop that talent into the types of bankers that we need to be a high-performing bank in this marketplace, through time, we find ourselves at a war to keep that talent. And that war is fought on many fronts. Certainly, it's fought on the compensation front in terms of direct pressure and competition we would see from others. But it's also fought on the front of inclusivity. Does an individual feel included in the environment? Do they see PNC as a place to come and hone their skills, hone their talents, grow as perhaps a manager, a leader, or an individual contributor? And then with that growth, do they see opportunity to pursue a career that would lead them toward what they might aspire for themselves or their family? That was the question that was on the table. And Bill Dimchik, our CEO, was very straightforward in suggesting that while he understood clearly the importance and the imperative of that, he needed some help in understanding what it would take for us to cement that and to create a transformative workplace, particularly for Black employees. And so Eddie and I, along with these other executives, got to work. And one of the areas that we were very happy to be in partnership with, Kat, was with your organization, talent organization, in thinking about what it would look like to bring together a group of senior professionals who happen to be Black and to talk actively about the things that were important to them in terms of their exposure to executives, the development of their professional capabilities, as well as perhaps some of their personal capabilities in the form of leadership or management, what it might feel like to have an organizational emphasis on that activity. And so earlier this year, after a ton of planning, we were able to accomplish that in bringing together about 150 senior Black executives from around the company. First time we'd done that in the history of PNC. And quite honestly, and almost immediately, we saw the benefits of that, both in terms of the networking. This group of individuals may or may not have known one another across the various business lines and functions of the organization. Secondly, a sharing of experiences in terms of development. And what we found is there were a number of different experiences that were brought to life in those conversations. And then third, and really most important, I think, in the moment, was a crisp and open dialogue between Bill and the rest of the members of the executive committee at that time and the 150 or so senior African American leaders in the room to talk about those experiences and what, from their perspectives, PNC could do to better and enable and empower that group of people. What was most important for me coming out of that, and maybe I'll give Kelly a moment or two to share her thoughts as well, was a feeling that as Black leaders in this company, we were not helpless. We had an opportunity to not only work on our own careers and in partnership with our leaders, the executive committee, Bill, and others who were deeply committed to that conversation, but to also reach back and see a group of growing mid-level and junior talented Black professionals that we could benefit with our experience. We could benefit with our ability to lead, manage our own groups. We could benefit with opportunities that may or may not have been there for us when we were in the place that they are in their career. Now, as we all know, unfortunately, 2020 has been hallmarked with the pandemic, and quite candidly, hallmarked with a lot of conversations that have been unpopular have been uncomfortable within PNC and outside of PNC through the late summer months and the rest. But because we were in dialogue together and we knew through the authentic leadership that Bill and the executive committee demonstrated, we've had a platform to actually go further than we ever thought we could do. And I'm looking forward to next year when we'll bring that group back together. But Kelly, I'd love to hear your thoughts as somebody who got an opportunity to participate in that.
Yes, well, thank you, Richard. And I do think, to your point around Mr. Demchek's focus, as well as the executive committee, I think that's the critical mass to everything that we're talking about today, is there must be buy-in from the top of the house, and not just any kind of buy-in. I mean, he's totally bought into the process and he's committed. And I love that and appreciate that about Mr. Demchek's focus, as well as the executive committee. And I do think that it made for a great foundation for a rich dialogue and conversation, really authentic conversation to take place. I will say that I was very excited to even have a seat at the table, to be present in the room, to have that dialogue and be a part of that conversation. But I think the big takeaway for me was the fact that we recognized that it had to happen, right? But we also recognized that it must be a continued dialogue, that it couldn't just be for that moment in time, and that we had to think about what will the future outcomes look like based on the foundation that we created through that platform, right? So I'm very excited that we've had, like you mentioned, Richard, there's been challenges. 2020 wasn't the year we planned, but we've been making it work virtually, which has been very exciting. And we've had the support of executive leadership that's continued to reach out and further advance that dialogue amongst our Black leaders, which is very exciting. So I am too looking forward to the next flow of that conversation as we progress throughout the balance of this year and into 2021 for sure. So thank you.
Kelly, I'm going to have you keep talking here for a minute, because besides the work you do on the line of business or the market specific D&I council, you also are on the steering committee for CNIB Forward. And we have a similar program to this in our asset management group. So can you explain what CNIB Forward is, why it was developed, and what we're doing to help new women, female employees develop their talents and find the network they need within PNC?
Yes, and thank you, Kat. I'm very passionate about this work in particular. So in our corporate and institutional banking team, we discovered a need. And as you can imagine, in this environment, just in the industry that we're in banking in general, it's been dominated by men predominantly, historically throughout the years. But we found that there's not only a need with women, but there's also a need to be able to support Black colleagues as well, that I'll get to here in a moment. But CNIB Forward was really created as a way to help advance women, early career women, with their roles here in corporate and institutional banking. So the Forward actually stands for our ability to advance their careers, recognize them, and then develop them and move them forward. So really excited about this groundbreaking work that began about 3 years ago. The three main pillars of our focus for CNIB Forward fall within the balance of career growth, which embodies skill development and training, in addition to networking, making those strategic connections and advocacy for our early career women. And then the visibility, I think, is the critical mass here for them too, because our organization, like many firms, is network centric. And we really want to be able to create a platform that early career women can gain exposure and have those connections with executive leadership and build those relationships. I think the impact of our program so far has been great as we look at the trajectory of the women, the early career women that serve us presently in corporate and institutional banking. We're serving about 270 early career women today, from the very beginning of their employment with PNC up through about their 8th year of their career here within our organization, within our firm. And we have a great army of support that helps us with this endeavor. So presently we have about 250 stakeholders, including line of business liaisons, executive sponsors, in addition to male allies that are really helping to cement our efforts and support what we're doing with CNIB Forward. I believe we saw the greatest need this year, being this pandemic year. Many women joined our firm in a virtual environment. And historically, we've been able to meet with them in person. But what we've done is we've taken this virtual environment and used it to our advantage, because we found that some early career women were feeling a little isolated, not having that face-to-face connectivity and that in-person connectivity like we needed to. So the way that we've supported them in the virtual instance is providing coffee chats with executive leadership and allowing those coffee chats to be held also by mentors and other executive sponsors on topics that are really relevant to their growth and development within our great organization. So that has been very imperative during this time. Obviously, we're using tools like Zoom and Skype to be able to host those coffee chats and other networking opportunities for early career women during this pandemic process. But I think it's been a great way to get them exposure to executives that, let's face it, they would have likely been traveling in another environment and not accessible as they have been in this virtual space. So we're trying to take advantage of that and get them as much exposure and connectivity as we can, utilizing this great technology and tools that we have. And then finally, as I mentioned earlier in my conversation about what we're doing in CNIB Forward, we're adding a new layer of support for Black colleagues within corporate and institutional banking, which is very exciting and one that I'm very passionate about too. So we're going to be able to focus experiences now for early career success for Black colleagues within corporate and institutional banking. And as a performance award winner, you know, this is one of our company's highest honors, and I'm fortunate to be a part of the 2015 class. That has afforded me the opportunity to be able to support at a different angle and really show other leaders, as well as Black leaders, what the outcomes could be within this great firm. I think there's just so much upside and so much capacity for our Black colleagues. Again, it's back to that network-centric focus, making sure that we get them the exposure to have opportunities where maybe they can get a seat at the table, but they're not there to advocate for that seat at the table. We need that kind of executive sponsorship and support to be able to drive that outcome for our Black colleagues as well as our early career women. So that's, I think, can be a way that we can sum all of that up for a thriving and fulfilling career here at PNC. So CNIB Forward is just one of the many programs that we offer to retain and promote women. And Kat, you lead the development programs like Women's Leadership Development and the New Men as Allies program. What are the aspects of those programs that smaller businesses?
Well, I think the first thing I would say is that leadership development programs, you know, if you went back 20 years, they were always focused on leaders, and there was no specificity for women per se or people of color. You know, 20 years ago, that seemed to be the resonant thinking that, you know, leaders were leaders regardless of their gender or race. I think what we found is that women's leadership development programs, and even recently ones that we've added for our colleagues of color, really are important, because the old leadership programs suggested that there was sort of one way to do it and that everybody should follow the same model. And I think what we've learned for women and people of color in our company is that there are many, many different models, and that we need to support what's special and unique about their background and their gifts to the company and help them bring those out in a way that they can create a really unique leadership experience for themselves. So for smaller companies, I would say lean on partners. There are a lot of wonderful organizations out there that can help you build either a women's leadership program or may have seats that you can send one or two of your members to. We did that even when we first piloted our leadership program for African Americans, Hispanic, and Asian. We sent our colleagues to a program that Management Leadership for Tomorrow was running. We also built a program in partnership with an organization called the Forte Foundation called Men as Allies. And we helped them build sort of the corporate version of that program. And we found it to be incredibly valuable to have cohorts of men from across the country sit down and try to understand what they could be doing differently in support of women in our company as a starting point. But we see the Men as Allies program as working across all areas of diversity. And so we were excited about seeing it grow. But that's another example of a big company, PNC, partnering with an organization that we trusted and respected to help deliver something that we thought would be unique for our company. So I think that's what small companies should do, is look for partners and leverage those partners who may have the capability of giving you the talent moves that you need. The other thing I would say about PNC is we started talking about this maybe 3-4 years ago when our CEO really declared that he wanted a talent-focused culture. He said, it's going to take us making bold moves, bold talent decisions. And what has seen over time, and what we know to be the case, is people sort of follow these trajectories in their career. And if you looked at our trajectories at the time, all that would happen is white men would continue to increase in the organization. And what were we doing to sort of identify earlier in their careers, or identify talent that could take on a really big opportunity and, you know, leapfrog them into those opportunities and see how they could perform. And so, you know, maybe there's always value in, as a small company, really understanding your talent and having a plan for that talent over time, and maybe taking some bold moves, giving them a chance to take some risk and see how that pays off. And so I'm always a fan. I tell young people all the time, the best thing you do in your career is take risk. That means as a company, you have to be willing to take that risk as well. So Greg, you've already shared some thinking about and adaptations we've made to attract employees with disabilities and how we're working to create a more inclusive culture. And what's been the impact for us on PNC Enable, which is our employee resource group for people with disabilities? How have they made a difference in all of this?
And Kat, I think before I dive into my response, I just want to add, I think that you, Kelly, and Richard all have hit on some very important things that I'm just going to lead into here. As I mentioned earlier, our goal is to ensure that our company is ready to be the employer and bank of choice for people with disabilities. And that work really starts with ourselves. We all have to be able to contribute to that overarching objective of trying to create that culture. The culture is not its own living, breathing thing. We all are collectively a part of that broader culture. So as I have said so often, at the core of what we've accomplished together is the recognition that accessibility is not simply about accommodating people with disabilities, but it's that focus on inclusivity that benefits not just those with disabilities, but everyone. We have to be mindfully proactive in thinking about how do we make sure that we are factoring everyone into literally everything that we do. And to understand how we do that, we've got to fully understand the challenges that exist in the workplace, in the marketplace. We've got to be able to tap into that expertise in order to really gain a full appreciation for the experiences that our end users and our customers are having. And I think that is true for PNC as it is for all the smaller businesses out there and every other organization that exists in the marketplace. And fortunately for us, we have a way of tapping into our workforce. And Kat, you highlighted it. It is enabled, the EBRG. And PNC Enabled is the employee resource group here that is comprised of over 1,000 members who are dedicated employees who help guide us in setting those standards and developing our strategic priorities for accessibility. And on top of this, they represent the end user experience in everything we do. And tapping into that experience is extremely valuable. And I will add that this is true not only for Enabled EBRG, but all the other EBRGs that support our company's broader goal of being a truly inclusive place to work. And as a company, we have collectively had to make a commitment to move beyond compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act and take on a more strategic and proactive role in approach to accessibility and inclusion. And we needed everyone to be able to recognize that they have a role to play in making that experience easier. So to help weave that mindset into our workforce, we introduced a brand new learning journey in September that was called the All Access Learning Experience. And that learning experience was made available for employees and managers. And it was a truly one-of-a-kind learning experience that was built specifically to address disability etiquette and respect for those who are who have a disability every day, and to be mindful of what it truly means to be inclusive in the workplace. And I'm very proud to say that in just 2 weeks, half of our company had completed the training. Key to that progress is the executive leadership team. And they're working putting accessibility at the forefront of everything that we do. And Kelly was so right. If the executive leadership team doesn't own this, then all of this work is not going to be as effective. We're not going to get to where we want to go unless the executive leadership team is personally invested. Our customers are going to go bank somewhere else if they feel like other companies value their own values or reflect their own values more so than we do. And that is why it's so important that our leaders care. Fortunately for PNC, our leadership truly does care and value that experience. And we have taken that Main Street existence to a whole new level. And I'm very proud of the fact that we are no longer stumbling over political correctness, and we're no longer talking about the rules, the ramps. And today we are just beginning to talk about people and their experiences. And I think we are just beginning to discover the magic that happens when we factor in the end user into our daily scope of work. And Enable has been a fantastic catalyst in our progress for us.
Thanks, Greg. You know, employee business resource groups are such an important part of our company and our culture. We have thousands and thousands and thousands of colleagues who participate in a resource group that represents their background or interest, but often multiple resource groups because they want to support another organization like our people with disabilities or our veterans. And so they really are important in bringing inclusion to our workplace that we're trying to accomplish. Richard, you were an executive sponsor of an EBRG. How important are the affinity groups, and has the role of the EBRGs changed or become more important now in this period of social unrest? How do you see it?
Yeah, it's a great question, Kat. So I'm the executive sponsor for the African American Employee Business Resource Group. And let me give just a touch of context, because I think, every company, including ours, has been on a journey. And I think the EBRGs actually are probably the biggest reflective artifact of the journey that we've been on. So I'll go back, almost 12, 13 years ago when we were a much smaller bank. We were not in as many markets, and most of the markets that we were in didn't look like the markets that we're in today in some large degree. Today we're in, a DC, a Chicago, an Atlanta, Houston. And as we expand out to the West, even more markets that are both diverse in their makeup and every aspect of diversity, as I mentioned earlier. And at the time, our leaders, including our CEO at the time, Jim Rohr, and Bill Dimchik was a part of that executive team, recognized that as we grew into that new reality that would become PNC, that we needed to reflect deeply those market opportunities, those marketplaces, both in terms of the talent, if you will, coming from those marketplaces and the demand for our products and services that we would naturally hope that we would be successful in deploying into those marketplaces. And so it's under that vision from that executive team at the time that we actually created the notion of employee business resource groups, and really didn't know where that conversation would lead. We started with a very few diverse segments that we thought made sense: an African American group, an Asian American group, a Latino group, and now, to your point, it's grown. I think next year, if we're meeting our targets, we'll be over 100 chapters of employee business resource groups across our company, and more than 16,000 employees. Now, to pivot to 2020, which you just can't have any conversation today without talking about 2020 and the very interesting year that it's been. Through time, those employee business resource groups, including the Black Employee Business Resource Group, have evolved to talk about connection to the marketplace. They've evolved to talk about networking and development in terms of the retention of the talent, as we spoke to earlier. They've evolved to help shape how brand shows up in markets in partnership with our regional presidents and our other bankers and businesses in the market. I think today, all of the employee business resource groups have really leaned into a dialogue to really create community in a way that, I'm not going to say it's new to PNC, but certainly in this environment. through, Zoom calls and all of the rest of the things that we've mentioned. It's certainly important for us to lean in and to really be intentional about the inclusivity we have. So not just the Black Employee Business Resource Group, but also PNC Enabled, the Latino X group that we have, the Asian American group, our young professionals group, our veterans group, have all leaned into conversations that I think have enabled us to listen and learn from what we heard and the sharing that went on there. And I think as a management team, our next step is to get into action, to enable our leaders to hear about that feedback, some of which, frankly, was awkward, right? What do you say to an employee who tells you that they were put in a really, a situation by a customer or another employee that you just would not have wished on anyone? And how do you enact policies that give them the benefit of being empowered to do what's necessary, while at the same time remembering that we want to take care of customers and we don't want to find ourselves embroiled in discussions that aren't part of the business imperative. So I think we take action based on what we heard. We depend on those employee business resource groups to be the sinew in the markets that tie us together, that tie us under one brand, particularly in an environment where we can't be in proximity to one another. And I continue to listen and try to be in support of the different presidents of the 16 African-American employee resource groups that we have around the marketplaces, as they hear from their constituents, as they go through leadership changes. We just had an election here where many new presidents were coming into their first days in office and looking and seeing what they have inherited and the uncertainty that lies ahead and what their business plans will do to enable them to engage their constituents and continue to grow their influence in the marketplace. So they are without a doubt connected to the brand of PNC, and I'm in full support of them, not only as a sponsor, but as a part of the business that I run at PNC.
Thanks, Richard. I think we'd be remiss if we didn't reference PNC's commitment to female customers and our 3,000 plus PNC certified women's business advocates. Though technically not part of our diversity and inclusion programs, women's business development at PNC works to address the fact that women-owned businesses are often under-resourced, and women in decision-making roles have often felt that financial institutions don't get them. And we know for a fact that Black business owners and executives have similar struggles. So I'm going to come back to you, Richard. Can you elaborate more on the connection between PNC's commitment to diversity and inclusion and our $1 billion commitment to social justice, and how will this commitment show up in our markets, and how will it impact our customers?
Sure, and again, thanks for the question. Whenever you talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, you invariably get into a conversation about how things intersect. None of us is just one thing, right? All of us are a variety of different things, be they men or women, professionals, those are who are differently abled, those are who are of color. We're all many, many things. Earlier this year, our board of directors and Bill Demchik, our CEO, made a commitment, a rather large commitment, $1 billion commitment to help challenge systemic racism affecting the Black community and in low to moderate income communities all across our country. And I was fortunate to be asked to help shepherd and create the strategy for that. And we're really close to talking very specifically about how that's going to happen, but I'll give you a little bit of a sneak peek, if you will, at the things that we're talking about internally in the early days thinking. As a bank, it's pretty straightforward for us to think in terms of financial tools and resources, operations and systems. And we're going to take a similar approach as it relates to this, because that's a very relevant place for us to talk as bankers. And so really, there are three domains we've staked out in relation to that. One would be economic empowerment, the notion of managing money and understanding the financial education and support and the wherewithal to be able to leverage the resources that you have to their best and optimal use, but also taking a hard look at our own products and services and making sure that they also mirror that ability to enable our clients and potential future clients, both in the African American community, in low to moderate communities, and throughout all of the communities that we serve, to their best and brightest and highest use. And then last but not least, one of the things that we see in terms of empowerment is the disparities in data points like home ownership rates or the wealth gap that exists between African American households and non-African American households. That really comes down to asset growth. I think many of us know that the largest single transaction most households will engage in is the purchase of a home. So we're going to take a look at our products or services and create a platform to enable more folks to buy homes that they can afford, and that will continue to grow that base and reduce that disparity through time. I'll pivot to the next domain, which is education. PNC has long been a supporter of quality and equitable early childhood education for 16 plus years. We have provided both resources in terms of writing a check. We have a $500 million commitment for early childhood education, but also sweat equity in the form of volunteerism. Just last year alone, more than 20,000 of my colleagues volunteered more than 120,000 hours for early childhood education across our country. And I serve on a number of task force and boards for early childhood education here in the state of Virginia, as do many of my colleagues around the country. It's something that we have embedded in our DNA. But why do we care if a child is behind by the age of 5, which is the point at which we stop talking about early childhood education and pivot to education? Well, we care because we want to make sure that that child, no matter what their background or ethnicity, have an opportunity to be at or better than parity at 3rd grade and 8th grade and 9th grade and 12th grade on their way from the cradle to the workforce. So inside of that, we recognize an opportunity to invest deeply, not only in a collegiate track, one that would lead young men and women to head off to college and find a career of their choice based on the education that they've received. And we'll certainly invest in those and in not only in historically Black colleges and universities, but just in people in general who have that opportunity. But if you decide that you don't want to go to college isn't for you, that shouldn't relegate you to a set of bad choices. And all around the country, there are investment opportunities popping up around this notion of apprenticeship. This notion that maybe as early as 9th and 10th grade, you're introduced to industry or skills that would be meaningful to a good job coming out of high school. And those opportunities include getting a job as early as 10th and 11th grade. So you'd go to school sort of in the morning and midday, and then you'd go to a job that's going to provide a paycheck, but it's also going to provide a set of beneficial skills that you could, at the end of your high school career, have a credential to either, one, go get a job with this high school diploma and a set of skills that you've been able to now demonstrate through time and grow. 2, keep the job that you've got and grow it into a full-time good job, a good career. Or 3, maybe you'll decide to up-tier back into that collegiate track. And then there's, again, a number of opportunities to help support you going to and through college. Last domain that we're going to focus in on in this effort for the $1 billion commitment will be what I'll call entrepreneurism. So we saw throughout this downturn that a number of small business owners, and in particular Black small business owners, suffered greatly in terms of going through this very dire business cycle. And one of the programs that the government created, the Payroll Protection Program, was a clear picture that there was an opportunity to create a better connection between the banking industry and those Black businesses. This focus on entrepreneurism for me will be the creation of, and we're working with a partner on, a national platform for what I'll call entrepreneurial basics. What are the trade-offs in terms of incorporation that you're making? What are the trade-offs in terms of how we hire folks? Are we using 1099s or, in fact, establishing a payroll? And how are our record keepings related to that? How do we forecast revenues and expenses? So those basic fundamental factors that you would need to run a business. And by the way, those are the exact same factors that are going to be necessary for access to credit, which is another important rung on this opportunity, if you will, to enhance entrepreneurism in the Black community. So if you are friends and family, you're going to want to know where's your money going. It's not being thrown away. And having a business owner steeped in those entrepreneurial basics will be a key factor. If you're an investor, you want to understand the return on that investment that you just purchased. And again, those basics are going to be key. And if you're a lender like us at PNC, The first couple of questions we're going to want to know are, what are our sources of repayment, and when, in fact, will we get paid back for that loan, and at what price? Also, places where it's key for you to understand those basics. So that platform that we're establishing, along with the other dimensions I talked about, we're seeking partnerships today, partnerships across the board for folks who are subject matter experts in African-American racial equity issues to help pressure test the model that I just described to make sure that we are, in fact, hitting upon all the right cylinders in support of taking those barriers down. So again, as I say, over the next couple of coming weeks, look for there to be a pretty deep communication strategy on how we're going to execute this in market as well as corporately with our regional presidents, as well as some of the corporate partners that we'll engage with.
Well, thank you, Kelly, Richard, and Greg, for a wide-ranging conversation around diversity. I know for some of our smaller employers out there, they may ask, hey, how do I get started in D&I training, if that makes sense for your company? Personally, I would say that we've been on a long journey at PNC, and what I think we found to be the best is unconscious bias. So if you're going to start with something, maybe you start with a program around unconscious bias, so it brings out for people the decisions they don't even know they're making on a daily basis as it relates to women and people of color. And second, we often get asked, hey, I'm a small company, I can't really set up an employee business resource group or have as big a variety as a company of your size. You know, I would suggest to look to your local communities. It could be your economic development organizations or local diverse communities who try to help create EBRGs that people can attend who are from different companies. As a suggestion. But let me just thank you for spending the time with us this afternoon, and appreciate your interest in hearing how PNC has done on this journey, and hope that we've been some help to you. So thank you.